Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on mysterious and weird true stories, from glitches to the paranormal. This is my monthly compendium of case reports between the 1st to 26th of April 2021, case files number 94 to 117. Case file number 94, written by Zoroastra. Time for a frappe. Cream is desired but unaffordable. Then the universe changed the rules. Basically, this happened at age 17. During summer, I would often get a vanilla frappe with cream on top after school, right? Cost of $2.60 with cream and $2.40 without. So one day I went to buy a frappe after my mom had picked me up. After counting the pile of coins twice, she said she didn't have enough spare change in the car for the cream topping, but I said that was fine, a minor issue. I took the change, accepting that I'd forego the cream. As I was in the queue, I kept counting my change, out of boredom. I also had an obsessive habit of counting, just in case I made a mistake, so as to save me the embarrassment of realizing I was short of money in front of the cashier. So I counted the money 6 times, making sure to space out the coins so as to not miss any, then proceeded to hold it in my clutched fist. Suddenly, a thought popped into my head, not one I initiated myself. Hey, it would be cool if my money suddenly multiplied. I entertained the thought as a joke, because I knew these things would never happen, to me at least. It was physically impossible. Fast forward now, I get to the cashier and order my frappe. As I go to pay, I realize about 4 20-pence coins had appeared in my palm out of nowhere. More than enough to buy a cream topping. My eyes probably tripled in size. I realized I was starting to look crazy to the cashier, so I composed myself and acted like nothing happened. Smiled, got my drink with extra cream, and left. On my way out, I was frantically trying to bend the new 20-pence coins. I thought they must have been fake. But no, they were real enough, all right. I got to the car, told my mother, and she admitted she had prayed for me to be able to afford it. So the thought that had popped into my head was really some telepathic message notification either from God, the Matrix programmers, my mother, or some equivalent. Case notes, file number 94. Well, you didn't exactly get rich off this glitch, but still. It's just the fact that there's no logical explanation, nothing that could provide adequate reasoning. What can we think of here? I mean, someone slipped the coins into your closed palm without you noticing. How or why would they do that? Or you miscounted 6 times while waiting in line. And your mom did too. Yeah, that's not likely. So no, I would say the universe just decided you were getting cream that day, no matter what. Case file number 95, written by A Crunchy Cupcake. They say mirrors are a window into our soul. Who's to say they're only one way? About 9 years ago, I had a most bizarre experience that I still to this day cannot explain away, with even more strange details that I and a friend had uncovered since then, which has caused even more confusion and adds to my theory that I had actually experienced something that I reluctantly call paranormal. I say reluctantly, as I've always loved all things creepy, yet never really bought into the whole ghost thing. I'm more of a gotta see it to believe it type of girl. But I believe I finally had my first encounter. I was a single mother of 2, fresh out of a relationship with her father, but ready to start my own life. I worked both a full-time and a part-time job, but still couldn't afford much, and I wasn't picky. I stumbled upon an ad in the paper for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath trailer in a small town close by, known for its extremely low crime rate. Rent was only $475, and the area was relatively nice, very woodsy. Being familiar with the town, I felt safe there and thought I totally lucked out with this one. I met the landlord that afternoon. Her name was Elsie. She was quite the southern belle. She gave me a very quick viewing of the trailer. It was dark inside, but I did my best to see what I could, although I immediately knew I wanted it, mostly because it was so cheap. Elsie handed me the keys the minute I told her I'd take it, No application, no background check, just a good judge of character, I guess. I was a young single mom anyways, so maybe she just felt bad for me. Her only stipulations were no pets, and she was very stern when she told me to leave the mirrors up. Mirrors? Okay, sure, no big deal. I barely had anything to my name, so a little extra decor was fine by me. I moved in as quickly as I could. It felt great being able to have a place that was my own. It wasn't much, but I loved it, and I worked hard for it. A little idea of the layout. It was set up as most traditional trailers are. You enter into the living room. To the left is an open kitchen that leads to a short hallway with a washer and dryer, and then the door to the master bedroom and bathroom. To the right of the living room was a hall that led to the kids' separate bedrooms that were connected by a Jack and Jill bathroom. The first mirror was in the living room/kitchen, pointing towards the window in the living room and firmly bolted to the wall. The second one was in the children's hallway, but located way too high up, like awkwardly too close to the ceiling. But hey, I'm short, so whatever. I didn't think much of it. We all settled in, and we were doing fine. In the beginning, I wasn't working so much, so I could get adjusted. My kids stayed there frequently since I wasn't working such late shifts. I had put my 8-year-old to bed and my 2-year-old in hers, and went to my room to unwind. Suddenly I heard what sounded like little pitter-patter footsteps in the hall by the door. I was in the process of transitioning my 2-year-old daughter from her crib to a toddler bed, and thought she had just gotten up. I sat for a minute, expecting her to swing open my door, but she never did. I got up and walked into the living room, and nothing. Walked into her bedroom, where she was still sleeping soundly. I shrugged it off and assumed it was just an old trailer, with maybe a cat or something underneath it. I didn't give it much thought until eventually the footsteps kept happening at the same time every single night. The same pattern too. Pat pat, pat pat, pat pat. It sounded identical. Sometimes it would happen multiple times if I had guests over, but like I said in the beginning, I've always been a skeptic, so I eventually just began to laugh it off and tell friends it was just a ghost and not to worry, as a joke. I didn't live close enough to anyone for it to have been an echo. No way an animal could have that type of consistency. It wasn't consistent with any time frame for when I used appliances or turned the heater or AC on. I had no answer for it, so ghost joke it was. Time moved on and things started to get weirder. The water faucet in the bathroom would turn on randomly. Toys in the living room would turn on by themselves. Footsteps continued. I spent a lot of nights alone there since I had to work so much. My second job was in retail, and I often wouldn't make it home until about 10 p.m. or so my kids often had to sleep at their dad's. I ignored the weird things as much as I could, because I didn't want to focus too much energy on it and then spook myself out. Although that did eventually happen. I started having horrible nightmares and my sleep paralysis started up again. It was a tough time for me mentally, so I blamed the sleep disturbances on depression. About a year or so after living there, I had landed a better job and could afford something a little nicer. While looking around at houses, I came up to a cute little cabin-like home centered in between a blue home and white trailer. It had a for rent sign out, and I remembered that I had a friend that once lived in the little blue house next door with her husband and daughter, so I thought I'd at least walk up to the cabin house and take a peek inside. Upon stepping on the porch, a feeling of dread suddenly washed over me. I ignored it. I walked up and looked into the window, and what I felt was absolutely awful. A terrible chill went down my spine, and I felt nothing but negative energy. I quickly left. I've never felt anything like that before. I called a friend that was closer to the friend that used to live in the blue house next door to get the scoop on the cabin house, as it had spiked my curiosity. "Hey girl, you know that house next door to where Abby used to live?" Friend: Yeah, that house is haunted as hell. I used to stay there with an old friend." And she continued on about that experience. She reminded me that the blue house next door that our friend Abby lived in was also very haunted. We called Abby and we all three began comparing experiences. Abby moved into the blue house with her husband and daughter, who was around 3 at the time. We discovered Elsie was also the landlord to each of the 3 properties in question. Each of the houses had odd mirrors bolted to the walls with peculiar placement. Abby's daughter began seeing a little girl in their home shortly after moving in, and one night, she began screaming, "Go away!" and throwing toys at a wall, completely frightened by something her parents couldn't see. Prior, they also had experienced flickering lights and faucets turning on and off, but that night was it for them. The next day, they saged the house, called a priest, and had him bless the home and remove the mirrors too. They didn't have any more trouble after that, but still moved out not long after due to unrelated reasons. We then did some digging on our sweet Southern Belle landlord, and found out that her family basically runs that small little town. We also discovered that Elsie had 2 or 3 children pass away under unusual circumstances as infants. Unusual is as detailed as we could find. We also did find out that she had some siblings that passed away very young as well. We found their family cemetery in the town, but it had a locked fence around it, so we weren't able to access it. Today, I'm firmly convinced that those mirrors had something to do with it, but what exactly, I'm still not sure. Case notes, file number 95. One thing I'm curious of though. This Elsie Southern Belle type landlord, as you describe, you said was very stern when saying to not take the mirrors down. Do you think she was doing this out of malice or protection, a type of curse maybe? Well, this happened 9 years ago, so I assume nothing bad happened later to Abby when she took down the mirrors. Oh, and did Elsie talk about Abby after finding out the mirrors were brought down? If so, I wonder what she said, if she was scared or angry. The author responded to my comment, saying, "So after learning that a few of Elsie's children, 2 or 3 I believe, passed away from unusual circumstances, and that she also had siblings that had passed away at young ages, I felt like maybe it was more of a family type thing. I think I stated that her brother was, and I believe still is, the mayor of the town. Oddly, I had received an election type ad for him of some sort. And she owns several rental properties there. I believe their family has some pretty deep roots there. I'm actually now very curious to go a bit more in-depth in my research to see if I can form any new connections on this town. I think Elsie was probably wanting to keep the mirrors up as a way to, in essence, keep the spirits of her lost family members alive. As a mother of 4, I could totally understand wanting that, and I truly do believe that it was a spirit or ghost or what have you in my trailer. The skeptic in me has trouble saying that it definitely was a ghost or spirit. I think it was that of a child. And if mirrors really are portals, it would make a lot of sense why Elsie requested they stay up. She did say it sternly. I can still hear her saying that exact sentence. You can just leave the mirrors and the curtains up now. Don't take them down. I have no idea what the curtains had to do with anything, but she only had curtains in the living room and my bedroom. I was just so anxious to move in, I didn't question it. As far as Abby, she, her husband, and daughter moved out not long after. I don't believe it was related to the incidents because from what she and her husband told me, it all pretty much stopped after they saged the house, had a priest bless it, and remove the mirrors. I do not know if Elsie was even aware that the mirrors were taken down until after Abby and her family had already moved out. I would love to have known her reaction though. Oh, I actually spoke to Abby's husband last week and mentioned this post to him. He said he remembers seeing Elsie wearing a jacket once with a really strange symbol. Unfortunately, he can't remember anything else about it, which sucks. But he says he's never seen a symbol like it. He said originally he had thought it was Masonic or something, but he couldn't find anything that resembled it. I asked if he could even draw a general idea of what it looked like, and he said he didn't even know where to start. Case file number 96, written by Pani Christina. Awakens to a great brightness. What could cause this blinding light? This happened quite some time ago, in the late 90s, early 2000s, when I was around 17 or 18 years old. Till today, I do not have any explanation for what happened, and I never told this story to anyone because I would just simply sound stupid. We lived in our family house in a small town, and my room faces to our garden. Beyond our garden, there are other neighboring gardens from all directions. A quiet neighborhood, though. So one summer night I was sleeping, and I suddenly woke up. There was a disturbingly huge brightness coming from outside, in our garden. I'm sleepy and groggy, getting up from the bed to check out what is going on. Everything is quiet, no noise besides the brightness in the window. Everything is the same usual summer night as every other night. To get to the window, I'm passing by my TV desk and shelves where the other video player was, which had a digital clock on it. I checked the time. It's 1:14 a.m. I'm getting to my window, and I saw an incredibly huge spaceship, exactly like the ones we've all seen in the movies and documentaries. All the brightness is coming from it. It's floating above the gardens with no sound at all. At this point, I want to add that while I do believe in the paranormal, and have plenty of paranormal experiences myself, I do not believe in aliens, and I never was interested in them at any level. I don't usually watch such movies, and I'm still not interested in it. So, I acknowledge what I saw. I thought, what the hell is this? This looks like an alien spaceship from docs, movies. So, the light and brightness is coming from here. Oh my god. What is this thing doing here? Will they take me or what? Okay, this is just impossible. At this point, I thought, okay, let's get back to bed. This is just surreal. This all took like 5 seconds at my window. I didn't see, hear, experience anything else besides what is written above. Then I turned back to get into my bed, again passing by the shelf and video player, and the digital clock shows the time now as 3:24. At this point I was really shocked, because over 2 hours had passed in what felt like the blink of an eye. I still felt incredibly sleepy, got back in bed and fell asleep quickly despite these disturbing events. I didn't feel scared or afraid, even unsafe in any moment. Now some of you may say I dreamed it. Everything is possible. However, I absolutely feel certain it truly happened. Still today, I feel certain that it was not a dream. Even dreams are messy. There are unrealistic events and things in them. But even if they seem real after waking up, you know they were just dreams. But not this one. Not this one. Case notes. File number 96. Did you notice anything odd on the following day after you woke up for the second time? Any compressed grass or shredded flowers, ruffled hedges, anything like that? It's commonly reported that alien ships are completely quiet, which by itself is fascinating. But often it's also reported that the ground beneath a hovering ship is disturbed in some way. The author responded to my questions, saying, "No, absolutely nothing. Actually, all next day and even a week after, I was absolutely deep in it, because I couldn't explain the entire thing and I felt certain that it was not a dream. Nothing on myself either, no pain, no marks, no memories of anything else. Nothing in the garden or on our huge cherry tree. Just nothing, no traces at all." I responded, "It's curious about dreams, isn't it? Even when they're lucid, it's still easy to know a dream from reality. And how big was the ship, by the way?" The author responded, "Yeah, it really is interesting. Even many times while dreaming, you're aware that it's just a dream." How big was it? It was pretty hard to give an approximate size, let's say pretty big. Bigger than a house, especially in diameter. But in height, it wasn't very high. It was mostly oval, plate-shaped, with several round windows on it. And a huge light was coming from the windows and from the bottom part of the spacecraft. Or I don't even know exactly how to call it. Case file number 97. Written by Zamia48. Many signs, many signals. Many droplets of life's eternal persistence. Hi. This has been something I've been meaning to write for the past 3 months. Back on November the 22nd, my father passed away unexpectedly from a massive heart attack while out of town. He had it on the 21st. This date plays a role in something I discovered today. When we got to the hospital the morning of the 22nd, he passed within 30 minutes of my mother and I arriving in the room he was in. He was medically brain dead and hooked up to many machines that were keeping his vitals stable. What I thought was the craziest part was a minute before we lost him and were saying our goodbyes, I noticed that he had a small tear pouring down from his left eye and pointed this out to my mom. I like to think he was saying goodbye to us as well, even though we couldn't hear him. I had my phone on a table that was about 4 feet away from us. A couple moments after the passing, Siri was randomly going off. I took comfort in knowing that he held on for us to get there so we could say our goodbyes. The next morning on our drive home from the hospital, roughly 2.5 hours away from our hometown, right when we got off our exit to get home, I got a notification from eBay. Last summer, he got me a couple of NASCAR jackets to flip on eBay. One sold back in September, and the notification I got was that the second jacket sold. I thought to myself, this is too much to be coincidence for it not to be a sign. Over the next few days, when we were figuring out our life insurance policies and such, my mother got visibly angry because she took out an extra policy on him, but supposedly he didn't have an extra one for himself. Don't get me wrong, we aren't greedy or anything. Hell, I don't care if I get a dime. I just want my mom to be taken care of and minimize her worries. I was about to get ready to meet with the priest. The phone rings and invalid number shows up on the caller ID. I never answer unknown calls, but I didn't want my mother to deal with it, so I picked it up. I said hello a couple of times. Then the sound of a broken cell phone comes through, and the voice sounded that of a man in his mid-20s that was really sad. It said, "Don't worry," or "No worries. Where are you? Miss you. With Grandpa, love you." I said, "What?" a couple of times, and then the phone hung up. I was baffled. I looked up at the number again, and instead of 1-800, the number was 11-800. I did a reverse lookup of the number, and there was some communication company. I decided to call the number, and it was a standard touch menu. I stopped at that. Turns out, since time has passed, more things were sorted out and she doesn't have to worry, and there were secret accounts and policies. I've had signs here and there from him. He has even shown up in my room when I was sleeping. My mother's signs have been things she just had disappear only to reappear later. Her big one that she got, and it took her a bit to realize. My parents' lawn was one of my dad's pride and joys. He wouldn't let anyone touch it at all, and very particular on how it was cut. He would joke with my mother, "When I'm gone, who's going to take care of the lawn?" To which she would just hold up the phone and say, "Hello, lawn boy?" About 2 weeks after his passing, a landscaper called and left a message asking if she would like a price quote for lawn care. She didn't call back, and a couple days later the person called again and left the same message. Then it clicked for her. That was a sign for her. Mind you, it was December in Wisconsin. No one is worried about their lawn. Some other things from different family members. The day after his passing, one cousin shot the biggest buck of his life. My father had his heart attack while he was at deer camp. One of his sisters that he's close with said she found a white feather on her writing desk the morning after he passed. One of my other cousins, who was a funeral director and he worked with for a few years towards the end of his life, had a dream that seemed too real. She said she went over to the house and he was in the garage, putzing around, having a cigarette in his usual habitat. She said to him, "Uncle Mickey, what are you doing here? You're dead." To which he said, "Yeah, I know, and I'm doing just fine." Like I said, she said it seemed like one of those dreams that was too real. Now for what we found out today. My dad owned a barber shop for roughly 30 years. Today, my mother went by the shop to give the guy he mentored one of his clippers as a memento. He showed her a picture. It was a picture an old customer took. The picture was of a hearse parked in front of the barber shop. I guess the guy took the picture because he saw it there when he went into a store, and when he came out 20 minutes later, it was still there. So he snapped it because he thought it was funny. Well, the date of the picture, November 21st, the day my dad had his heart attack. I'm sure others have had some signs too, and I know I'm missing some of the other ones I've had. If you made it this far, thank you, and I really appreciate it. Case notes, file number 97. I'm really sorry for the passing of your father, but I'm glad he's able to give all these hints that he's okay. All these little incidents and little events that happen to show that he's still around effectively, putting your mind at ease. His essence is still there. But it really makes me wonder what life really is like after our body shuts off. The biggest issue is no food. What a torture. Although I suspect this isn't a concern of spirits when they cross over. Appetite goes away. It makes me wonder how all of this ties together with quantum immortality, simulation theory. Perhaps these spirits are simulated echoes, a sort of AI that replaces them, so those who are still alive don't feel lost or disconnected, while the player that passed awakens in the real world, then can re-enter the server as a new player, sort of reincarnation, without their past memories. A scientific twist on the paranormal, in a way. But who knows, maybe it's just God's rules and there is a proper afterlife. I'm not in too much of a hurry to find out. Case file number 98, written by Huge Ass, 347. From the inanimate is work conjured, decayed steps mysteriously rebuilt. A while ago, maybe 5 years or so, me and some friends broke into an abandoned house. The front door was completely blocked off and sealed. You would have to destroy it to get in that way. We got in by breaking a window in the backyard and climbing in. It was a long abandoned home. The architecture was early 1900s, maybe even late 1800s. It was quite interesting actually. We found a bunch of old books, newspapers, and notes gone brownish yellow from age, with dates on them from the 1920s to 30s. I remember one handwritten note had the date May 1930 something. Can't remember the exact year, but it was 1930s, at the top, and it said something like, "Dear so-and-so, how's your family? How's your child with the flu? Are they all right?" Mundane stuff like that. Anyway, there was crap everywhere, like I mean all over the place. You could barely walk. Destroyed furniture, a doll collection, a broken grand piano, books and stuff like I already mentioned. This is important to remember. So we went to explore the basement of this house, but we couldn't because the stairs leading down were destroyed. The first 2 steps from the top were there, then a giant gap, then the very last step before the bottom. The stairs, what was left of them, were old and rotten looking. They were cracked, dark brown and moldy, so we said screw it and left. The next day we went back with another friend, and this time there was a ladder laid flat over the giant gap in the stairs, with the rungs acting like makeshift steps. We thought this was a little weird, but figured someone else must have come in when we weren't there and laid the ladder over the gap to get to the basement. We ended up climbing down the ladder and exploring ourselves. After that, we left. The next day, for some reason, we went back again. This time though, the stairs were intact. No ladder, no giant gap, all the steps were there. And I'm not talking repaired. If someone had repaired them, they would have looked new compared to everything else in the house, new wood and whatnot. But they didn't. They looked old and rotten like everything else in this house. Old, dark brown, cracked, moldy wood. These stairs were not repaired. They were never broken to begin with, which was completely impossible. We had seen them broken the nights before, and there's no way someone brought tools into the house through the sealed door, objects lying all over the place, then repaired only the steps in one day and left. There's just no way. We kind of freaked out seeing those stairs, and left pretty quickly after that. I'm not really a supernatural kind of person. I don't believe in ghosts or even glitches in the Matrix for that matter. But to this day, those stairs give me the heebie-jeebies. I have no idea how they fixed themselves, and I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. Case notes, file number 98. I love it when mysterious events happen to skeptical people. Not because I think everyone should believe in the paranormal, but because prior to even posting this in your mind, you went through all the possibilities that you and your friends could fathom. yet it still makes no sense. And it's not some monumental glitch, but it still is impossible. We're just talking about steps. It's such a small thing, inanimate, that most would just dismiss out of hand without thinking of it. Yeah, definitely. Someone just came in and repaired it. That's it. That is the logical explanation, right? I'm thinking actually this could be a sign of quantum immortality, which to me isn't really a glitch. It's a feature of reality that's not well documented yet. So in this new universe, the steps are still decayed, but they're passable, unlike in your original universe. I prefer referring to them as servers. Case file number 99, written by Matt the Martian. A demon, a spirit. Whatever he was, his name was Denny. This story takes place over several years and happened while I was in late high school, early community college. My two best friends lived directly across the street from one another. Mike had been there most of his life, while Rob and his parents moved in directly across the street. We used their street as a headquarters, chill spot, and would spend most of our days together. It was always us three, and then random friends that would come and go as well. Since Rob's house was bigger, the three of us, along with anyone else that joined, would all gather primarily in his house, as it had a large finished basement and it was easier to just be teenagers down there. Rob also used it as his computer room and for band practice. Weird things started to happen that we couldn't explain. Entire groups of people were experiencing this, so I know we weren't crazy. It bothered some of us, but for the most part, we were just curious about it. Being teenagers, we all just instantly classified it as demons, of course. Off the top of my head, here are some isolated events. Heavy footsteps upstairs in the middle of the night. We went upstairs, grabbed kitchen knives, walked the whole house. Even upstairs, both his parents were dead asleep and didn't see anything. Upon further inspection, we noticed a sand dollar decoration that Rob's mom had set up on the living room coffee table was smashed to pieces, just sitting on the coffee table as if struck with a hammer. We also inspected the old grandfather clock and noticed the pendulum wasn't swinging. It usually does. The clock was icy cold to the touch. Following a party, all of us crashed in the basement. I want to say there were at least 5 people there. We kept hearing this weird 8-bit music coming from an unidentifiable source. No matter where we were looking, the sound seemed to be coming from nowhere and everywhere all at once. None of us were able to identify what the tune or melody was. One of our friends got upset and went home. Another night, Mike saw a shadow figure go into the laundry room. It was a room connected to the basement, and when he turned on the light and went in there, of course there was nothing there. All of us were accounted for, so it wasn't anyone pulling a prank. I wasn't there for this one, but Rob and Mike were hanging out alone at Rob's house and claimed that they had to lock themselves in one of the bedrooms upstairs as they felt something chasing or stalking them. They heard footsteps rushing up the stairs and then at the door. An assortment of random events, things being misplaced, strange sounds at night. These would happen periodically over the years. One night, Rob claims the demon showed itself to him in the basement when he was there alone. It didn't seem threatening. It was a man wearing a denim jacket, standing in the hallway propped up against the wall with his arms crossed. It then dissipated. Rob said he didn't feel threatened or scared, and that he felt rather comfortable with this ghost. There was nothing malicious about it. Since we didn't have a name for it, we decided to just name the ghost Denny. Because of his denim jacket, we now had a name for it, and would refer to this ghost as Denny for the remainder of time. Whenever we'd see Rob at school or around town, we'd ask him if he's seen or heard of Denny lately. I don't actually remember if he saw the apparition again, but small things would happen here or there, and we'd all just chalk it up to Denny and move on with our days. We officially stopped being afraid of it, strangely. One day, I was hanging out with Mike and his mom across the street at Mike's. Rob wasn't home, so it was just us. Mike's mom had been a local bartender in the area for decades, and we were just sharing some Denny stories with her. I'm pretty sure a Denny event happened the day prior, so we were just giving her a recap of what we experienced. Keep in mind, we had not mentioned the name Denny to her, as she didn't have any context, so we just referred to it as the ghost when speaking with her. She goes on to tell us that she knew of a man that lived there before Rob and his family moved in. He was a local at the bar she worked at, and he had apparently died of brain cancer some time ago. When we asked her what his name was, she said, "Yeah, his name was Dennis, but we all called him Denny." I felt like I had just been struck by lightning. Rob claims the activity had stopped completely since then. Had we given the spirit peace by acknowledging him or befriending him? Did he finally go to the other side because we learned his backstory? How is it possible he told us his name without ever actually telling us his name? I have so many questions. This is my ghost story, told as well as I could remember it. Case notes, file number 99. So, knowing an entity's name often in mythology or legends carries great power with it. From demons to dragons, something about the truth contains energy that is harnessed. If this is a written rule of the game, a commandment from God, I don't know, but indeed confirmation of veritas is nothing to laugh at. It's powerful. But it is incredible that your assumed name for him turned out to be his real name. What are the odds, really? I really hope that's the case though, that learning his name and speaking it aloud, confirming it, is what allowed him to rest, or reset. The author responded to me saying, 100% agree with you. I believe our discovery is what had pushed him to the next world. The crazy thought is that maybe he knew this and assumed our minds would work in a certain way after revealing himself. And I said, it's a cool theory that he actually appeared to you in a denim jacket, hoping you'd call him Denny, almost like a mentalist magician that uses the forcing technique to influence the choice of his audience. It doesn't always work, but in this case, if that's what he did, it certainly was successful. Case file number 100, written by Claustrophobia, a death, a service, and a recipe for relish, Grandpa's parting gift. This happened in December 2020. Backstory. On December 11th, 2004, my grandfather passed away. I was 13. Almost immediately, the 3 sons and 3 daughters tore the family in two and continued to feud. In February 2011, my grandmother passed away while I was deployed overseas. I was 20. The 3 sisters sold off the house and hoarded the family recipes and heirlooms. I only wanted one thing. I wanted my grandfather's dog tags. Being the only grandchild to serve in the military, it was something that meant a lot to me. Sadly, I was told that I would not appreciate them and was essentially dismissed, so I never asked for anything else. After I was honorably discharged from the United States Marine Corps, I pursued a career as a chef. Over time, I started to really want to recover certain family recipes. I had cut ties with the family because I wasn't going to pick sides, and I either wanted the family to be together or I didn't want to be a part of it. I haven't been in contact in years. My last contact was in August 2013, when barely any of the family attended my wedding. The story. The first week of December, I was talking with my brother. I only keep contact with him and my father. My brother mentioned how awesome it would have been to have the recipe for my grandparents' zucchini relish. They made it fresh with ingredients from the garden, jarred it, and it was a big hit with the family. A few days later, I was writing a letter to accompany some recipes that I was sending to a friend for Christmas. I wrote the letter while I was taking a ferry ride to an island I was to work at that day. When I finished the letter, I tucked it in a pouch that I never used in my backpack. The pouch is basically where your back meets the pack. It's open at the top and it's quite narrow. The letter remained there until the end of the week. Friday, December 11th, 2020. I returned home after work and immediately reached into that small, narrow pouch while focused on getting my house keys ready. I pull out a piece of weathered paper, confused as this isn't a letter. I am now focused on this paper while thinking to myself, What the hell? The paper is weathered, written in a blue ink, which reminded me of the cheap blue pens my grandfather kept around the house, and the handwriting is vaguely familiar. I proceeded to read, and a chill goes right up my spine. It's the zucchini relish recipe that my brother and I had talked about days prior. I immediately message him, and he tells me to look at the date. It is 12/11. In other words, it's the anniversary of my grandfather's death, and one of my grandparents' recipes spontaneously appears in an unlikely place, an impossible place. I audibly thanked my grandfather as I walked into my house with the recipe in hand. Even more eerie is the fact that my brother has told me that the 3 daughters do not have possession of this recipe, and yet here it is in my possession. It's one thing to discuss something, and social media shows ads for that exact thing. It's another thing to discuss something personal and have it spontaneously appear in an unlikely place by extraordinary means. Case Notes, File Number 100. Thank you for sharing this story with us, and thank you for your service. I'm reminded of a past story I read, where it was a little girl that appeared to them as a child, playing in a closet. Somehow, this ghost was able to conjure a pack of playing cards from nowhere. I wonder if your grandfather was able to do something similar, or if not conjure it, to transport it from another location where the recipe had already been written down and slotted into the pouch he knew you'd go looking for, but also that you never used before, so he knew you would know it's him. It's a small gesture, but one I imagine meant the absolute world to you. And now I want to know this recipe too. I've never had zucchini relish before. The author responded to my comment, saying, "You're absolutely right. It did mean the world to me. My eyes teared up once I realized what it was that I was holding. I'll be heading home soon and will upload the photo of the recipe. Instead of typing it up, I want to share the actual picture of the recipe to show how it appeared to me. It will do the story justice to show the proof." Case file number 101, written by Enzo Blois. The sun shining bright, eternally, and then it flickered. Hi everyone. I've never read anything about this sun flickering thing. Honestly, that's the best way I can put it. But I just found the subreddit and I wanted to understand more about this phenomenon. Is it real, a hallucination? I don't know. Have you ever noticed a sudden flicker in the light, as if you blinked so unconsciously that you caught yourself by surprise? Well, that's kind of what it feels like. When experiencing it alone, I always thought it was a sudden eye blink that I didn't see coming because I was so focused on whatever I was looking at. But there was one time where I wasn't the only one who experienced it. Me and some friends were having lunch together. The entire place was lit only by sunlight, when suddenly everything was void of light for a fraction of a second and went back to normal. My 2 friends looked at me, and one of them even screamed something like, "Oh my god, what the hell?" He looked confused, so I said, "No, I saw it too. The light just went off and back on," and they both agreed. We just moved on and pretended nothing happened, but it was very awkward. Years went by and I kept having similar experiences by myself, and never thought they were more than something only I saw. Something weird about me that I usually just ignored. They were rare enough. But this year, it happened again. I was with a friend in her living room, entirely lit by sunlight, and sunlight only. We were sitting on the floor painting some artwork when it happened. Honestly, I didn't pay much attention to it at first. Maybe I just got used to ignoring it. But I did see it. That was when she stopped and said, "Did you just see the whole room flicker to dark and back to light again?" She looked at me and I saw the confusion in her eyes. I said, "Yes," and told her about my experience years back with my friends at lunch. That's when my curiosity for this event grew. I know for some it may sound like a huge lie, but these are all facts and real events of my life. I'm here to share them and to know if there's anyone else out there that had a similar experience, or who has an explanation for this. Case Notes, file number 101. When you were with your friend the second time in our living room, was it in the same town as when it happened the first time with your friend? I'm wondering if there's an environmental trigger involved. Most glitches seem to involve location as being a huge determining factor, or when people deviate from their normal routines. It's as if the server is chugging to try to keep up with the unexpected choices, or environments. The author responded quickly, just saying that yes, both events happened in the same city. This is interesting, isn't it? So then yeah, it's just speculation, but I'd be really interested in knowing if this sun flicker happens in other locations. Is it tied to the person, the perception, or is it environmental? Case file number 102, written by Man on Road Throwaway. A night's drive and a slim man by the road. Creepy as hell. I was driving down a long, dark, secluded rural road at 11:30 p.m. and spotted an extremely tall, skinny, pale, around 7 foot tall, completely still man on the side of the road. When I drove along the entire road, he didn't move once and stayed completely frozen. When I first spotted him, I literally thought he was propped up like a mannequin due to his stillness. The closer I got, it looked like he was standing on top of a scooter-like transportation device, but didn't move at all. He looked as though he was wearing long pants and a long-sleeved t-shirt or jacket, despite the fact that it was an extremely hot night. It was unlike anything I've ever seen before. He looked so still and inhuman. He looked frozen. He looked like a mannequin. I can't even explain it. Someone else was in the car with me and saw the exact same thing, so I'm not crazy. Has anyone else seen a man or entity like this? Case notes, file number 102. Well, that gives off Slenderman vibes. I take it you weren't able to get a glimpse of his face if he had one. I wonder if these entities are perhaps related to aliens. Woohoo, back to aliens. It stands to reason though. There could be multiple species of aliens. Someone even left a comment on the channel saying that, perhaps as a theory, they are us from the future. And maybe others are actually extraterrestrials, the standard alien, just from another solar system. But either way, I wouldn't want to approach the slim man. Case file number 103. Written by user Rubens Mejia. A friend so pure, even death won't stop him from helping. I want to share this experience that happened to me around 15 years ago when I started to study in a town away from my parents' home. There was one man, let's call him Tony, who was a good friend of my father. Helped him at work sometimes, hence, I hung out with them usually. When I was 17, I moved to a bigger city to start university, so I traveled every 2 months to visit my parents for long weekends or vacations. After my second year away, this friend Tony died from alcohol abuse. My father told me on a phone call how it happened, or at least how he had heard it had happened. Around 2 months later, on Dia de los Muertos, Day of Death, here in Mexico, I went to visit my parents, also to go visit the tombs of the family, as the tradition goes. And at this point, I literally forgot about Tony's death. The apparition came around because I didn't catch the bus that arrives during the day to my parents' hometown, so I was forced to take one that arrives there around 2 a.m. It's quite a small town, so since I couldn't find any taxi near the bus station, I decided to walk home. Around 5 blocks away from the house, I had to pass on a bridge where people say that a decapitated donkey spirit scares people during the night. I was a bit scared, to be honest. But then, suddenly, this friend, Tony, reached me on his bike. I didn't mention that he always moved around on a bike, and asked me if I was just arriving from university. Maybe because I was originally thinking about the decapitated donkey, I completely forgot about the fact that Tony was supposed to be dead. So I started to talk to him. We walked passing the bridge and a couple more blocks for around 4 or 5 minutes, talking about the school, the food on the other city, and stuff like that. Just 1 block away from my parents' house, he told me, "Okay, I have to go check some things out over there," pointing in another direction. "But keep safe, say hello to your father for me." We said goodbye, and then I got home. Since it was early morning, I walked directly into my room and waited for the next day to go see my parents. It was until next morning, when I was just about to tell my father about Tony, when I remembered that he was supposed to be dead already. At that moment, I didn't tell my parents, but a bit later into the day, my father told me that he saw me arriving. He asked me if I was drunk or something, because he saw me talking to nobody, and then I told him. I think it was some kind of company on that bridge that I was afraid of because of the stories, and also because of the donkey story. I didn't even pay attention to the fact that my company was someone I knew was already dead. It is kind of funny for me, and actually never felt afraid of that moment. Thank you to Tony, old friend, that was there with me, even in death. Case notes, file number 103. When someone dies, their echo left behind is an imprint of who they were inside. That's my theory anyways. Your friend Tony clearly was a protector. Whatever traumas he couldn't overcome himself, he knew that you were afraid and wanted to comfort you, to shield you from whatever horrors existed in that place, either just as a myth swirling in your brain, or in reality. It's beautiful. No more needs to be said. But do let us know if Tony ever pops in for another visit. Case file number 104, written by Trash0729. She witnessed an ordinary blind panel pop back into the world out of nowhere. Necessary info. I have a sliding glass door to my back deck, which is shaded with one of those sliding sets of blinds that are commonly found in motels, as far as I've seen them before. If you Google search sliding door hanging blinds, you should see exactly what I mean. They're panels that hang vertically and layer over top of each other to condense as you push them open. Occasionally, they pop out of their little sockets and fall off if tampered with. We have only lived here for about 5 months, but this took place maybe 2 months or so after moving into this house. My son is 2 and he's curious about anything that moves in a swinging motion, so he messes with these blinds a lot. On a couple occasions, he's accidentally knocked a panel or 2 down by trying to get them to swing back and forth. Like I said, they just pop out and fall down, and I always hang them back up immediately because I don't like the chaotic look of missing panels, obviously. Anyway, one day I noticed one of the panels was missing, so I looked around the immediate area to find it, not knowing when it had fallen off. Mind you, these are hard to miss because they're like 8 feet long, give or take, and probably a good 4 or 5 inches wide, but I didn't see it laying anywhere nearby. I shrugged it off and went about my day, thinking I'd just ask my partner if something had happened to it, whenever he woke up. Fast forward to that point in the day. I bring up the missing panel to my partner, and he says he noticed it was missing too, but didn't know where it had gone, nor did he see it happen. So I'm thinking, okay, it couldn't have gone far, and since neither of us had thrown it away, it had to be here in the house, presumably somewhere close by. Although the panels aren't heavy, they're long and would be awkward for a child to try to carry or drag, but I didn't rule the possibility out until I had looked everywhere and couldn't find it. Again, it would be hard to miss one of those panels laying around, so I'm stumped by this point. I go back to the door and slide the blinds open and close several times, trying to see if it had gotten caught somehow. As I'm doing this, my partner is observing the track that each clasp is attached to, finding that there was no way one of those panels could get jammed up into it, even with intentional force. I'm swinging the panels back and forth, inspecting each one, finding nothing unusual about any of the remaining panels. Just as I'm about to give up and call it lost, I slide the blinds closed one more time, the exact same way I had just done 4 or 5 times prior, leading up to this moment, and the panel appears out of nowhere, right in front of my eyes. I couldn't believe what I had just witnessed, but the evidence was right there. The panel materialized directly in my line of sight, not in my peripheral vision or after I had turned around, but literally from the exact point my eyes were focused on. It appeared in what I can best describe as a visual pop, right side up and about 6 inches away from the actual track. This is the part that is kind of tricky to explain, but it was sort of curved towards me, like it had been a little bunched up, giving it enough momentum to fall into my direction, top end first. It didn't just fall like it had been hanging in the bunch, the way I'd seen them fall a handful of other times. It was more like the panel had been hanging higher than the others. I really hope that makes enough sense to give a mental image, but trying to put it into words, the way it fell, is what has held me back from creating this post. It was so unusual and unexpected that I didn't even have time to flinch. I just stood there gawking at the panel that had just respawned. My partner had been standing there the entire time, but of course he turned away when I said I had given up and went to slide the blinds closed. He didn't see it materialize, but he was definitely just as stunned to see it laying there on the floor, after we both checked thoroughly that there was nowhere for it to have gotten caught in the other panels. The only explanation we could come up with is that it got unclipped from its own clasp and somehow ended up clipping perfectly into another one behind another panel. But this isn't easy to do on purpose, let alone by accident. Another issue is that if sliding the blinds caused it to come loose, why wouldn't that have happened one of the first 5 times I slid the blinds open and closed? And lastly, I saw it appear from about 6 inches away from the track where it would have supposedly been attached, had that been the case, rather than seeing it pop out of a clasp. This is by far the most bizarre thing I've ever witnessed that has no paranormal aspects to it. I'm not so sure I believe in that realm, but I do believe in glitches. If I hadn't fully seen exactly what had happened, I'd probably brush it off, but even months later to this day, I'm 100% certain this panel had blipped out of existence and then right back before my eyes. Case notes, file number 104. Well, these disappearing glitches are right in my backyard. The only thing I've personally experienced too, though unlike for you, my object never returned. But what's going on here, I really do wonder. I've read quite a few glitches of individual people being out of phase with reality, but they're always kept gravitationally bound to the planet. I suppose it does stand to reason that inanimate items could be stuck in the same way that humans are, depending on what's causing the phenomena. Perhaps this is what is responsible for all of our missing items, or many of them. From socks to tennis balls, all the way to rematerializing distorted blind panels. Trippy. I do have some questions regarding the pop-in. Was there a sound involved? And also if the panel was the same as it was before, if you inspected it. There's small details, likely nothing, but I wonder if there are alterations to people or items that disappear and then reappear, or do we come back exactly the same? Some food for thought. Case file number 105, written by Twirly Girl 313. A father undeserving of love, dangerous, now dead. Is that really the end though? Not long after my father died, my mother and I were sitting in our living room, discussing various things. This was at night, and we were recovering from my father's death. Now, to be clear, my father was not a nice person. He was a narcissist, an alcoholic, and an all-around miserable person to be around. He thought he was superior to everyone else, and the world owed him a living. We were able to finally get him into a VA nursing home towards the end of his life, as we could not care for him at home as he dried out and threatened us daily. While we were sitting there, quietly talking, we heard his dreadful tread coming down the stairs. Boom, boom, boom. It was definitely his tread or gait. We both froze and stared at each other. When he got to the bottom, the disturbance stopped. I had goose flesh like never before, and it was difficult to sleep that night without one eye open, as he always threatened to kill us in our sleep. While he was in the hospital, he would call my mother every single night and tell her the most vile ways in which he would kill her. Fortunately, he was paralyzed from the waist down at this point and could not make good on those threats. I saged our entire house the very next day, corner to corner, every square inch. Did I mention that my VCR would regularly turn itself on when he was in the hospital, even though it wasn't plugged in? I also had horrible, vivid dreams of his hand reaching out from under my bed to grab me. Case notes, file number 105. This is a quick story that turned my blood into a boil. The only positive takeaway from this is that it does appear that the spirits aren't able to interact with the living world to that great of an extent. Perhaps it takes a great deal of concentration or practice to be able to manipulate objects, so he wasn't able to hurt anyone because he was new to the experience. So while your dead abusive father is in your house, I think you can hold him at bay. That said, you should move out if at all possible, or did you already since your father passed away? The author quickly responded, saying, "No, we are still in the same house, but the 2-day generous application sage cleansing did the trick. He's no longer around." Case file number 106, written by Headphone Music. His life is exceeding the bounds of rational coincidence. Is this even real? For the past year or so, I've been noticing that things around me don't seem normal anymore. I continue to have this overwhelming sense that everything is fake in a way, or almost dreamlike. I've even kicked around the idea that I may have died already and I'm in a state of purgatory. I recently took my family on a weekend getaway to Seattle. Being a couple hundred miles away from our home in Selah, Washington, it's an easy trip for my wife and I to manage with our 2 kids, 11-year-old and 4 months old. Over the course of our weekend excursion, I experienced a few things that I found to be odd and left me feeling a bit uneasy. The first occurrence was trivial enough, but it sort of set the tone for the eeriness of the weekend. I was gazing out of the window of our hotel room on the 12th floor, sipping a cup of coffee, when I noticed a plastic bag drifting in the wind. I watched the bag dance around in the air as it slowly descended. A green dumpster 12 stories below caught my eye, and I immediately thought, what if that bag floated all the way down there and landed in that dumpster? I stood at the window for 5 minutes or so, watching this bag slowly float towards the ground, gliding left, right, back and forth. The more I watched the bag, the more confident I became that it would find its way into the dumpster, and it did. This bag that I noticed off in the distance drifted 12 freaking stories and perfectly navigated its way into the dumpster below my building. Later that day, I was in the hotel lobby approaching the elevator to head up to my room. In front of me, there was a man with 2 children waiting for the elevator as well. The man had a guitar case strapped to his back, along with an amplifier and various other bags. His back was to me, and he had a hoodie on. For some reason, I thought to myself, what if it's Ed? Ed was a friend of mine that I hadn't seen in years. We used to work at an Olive Garden together in our younger days. We also played guitar together, and I did a fair amount of partying. Now here's the weird part, and my wife thinks I'm bat crap crazy, but bear with me here. The weird part was how confident I was that this guy was going to turn around and it would be Ed. The same confidence, almost certainty, I would say, that I had in that trash bag flying into the dumpster. The elevator doors opened, and the man and his 2 children walked inside. As the man turned around to enter the floor number on the elevator button console, it should not have been Ed that I recognized, but it was. It was Ed. We were both thrilled to see each other, and even held the door open to chat for a moment, hindering other folks in the process. Even as all this was occurring though, I couldn't shake the feeling that this isn't real. It's a very difficult thing to describe, but things just don't feel real. Later that evening, my 11-year-old son and I were on the balcony outside our hotel room. He was peering out over the edge when he suddenly whimpered out underneath his breath, "That poor guy." When I asked him who and what he was talking about, he said, "That bumblebee on the ground next to the dumpster. He's dead." We were on the 12th floor, like I mentioned earlier. There's absolutely no way this kid could see a dead bumblebee on the ground floor. Not to mention that the alleged bee was laying next to the dumpster that was the manifested landing zone for the floating trash bag. We argued a bit over whether or not he could see the bee when he finally convinced me to go down and take a look. As we made our way down to the street level, my thought process shifted. That same confidence that I had previously regarding the trash bag and Ed was back. Although I didn't mention it to my son, I was becoming increasingly certain that the bee would be there. And well, it was. It was freaking there, right next to the green dumpster containing the trash sack. The next evening, I took the family to a place called GameWorks, which is similar to Dave & Buster's or an adult version of Chuck E. Cheese. I placed our car keys, wallets, and other important crap all into the diaper bag or backpack, and we carried it onto the establishment. We spent a couple of hours playing games before finally counting our tickets and claiming prizes at the prize booth. We pocketed the prizes and went down the block to the Cheesecake Factory for dinner. After being seated for a few moments, my wife realizes that I do not have the backpack on. The backpack containing all of our money, credit cards, car keys, and not to mention food and supplies for our 4-month-old baby. The bizarre thing is that I have no recollection of ever taking the bag off. Apparently I did because it was gone, but I could have sworn up and down that I never took it off. I immediately go into panic mode, leap up from the table, and take off towards the GameWorks establishment. I run inside and dart around frantically for about a minute or two with the bag nowhere in sight. Finally, I calm down and focus. After breathing and focusing for a moment, I'm greeted with that same confidence that I mentioned before. I was confident that I would not leave the place without my bag. At that moment, a man approached me waving his arms in the air, calling me by my first name. He said, "Here, Cody, I've got your bag, man. Now get back to the Cheesecake Factory and enjoy your dinner." I was awestruck and definitely besides myself at that moment, as I had no clue in hell who this man was or how he knew my name and where I was eating for dinner. I didn't even think to question the man. I reached out, grabbed the bag, and left. This might seem coincidental to a lot of you, but these are just recent examples of how my life unfolds daily. Either I'm a walking conduit of coincidence, or something larger is at play. My wife thinks I'm nuts, but things are definitely not the same as they used to be. I don't know how exactly or why, but they just aren't. Things just don't seem real. Case notes, file number 106. You know, there have been theories that since 2020, the world isn't real. We've been plunged into purgatory. I don't know about that personally. I haven't experienced these strange coincidences as you have, nor do I have this feeling that things aren't real. Your experiences remind me less of purgatory and more like the Truman Show, as if people are observing you outside of real existence, playing with your perception and sanity. If my current leading belief is correct, that we live in a simulation, perhaps you have some troll game mod playing tricks on you as a joke. I'm just trying to put a more positive spin on what is fairly unsettling, I imagine. With all that noted though, you said that these glitches or anomalies, coincidences, they're occurring to you daily. So it's not just about Seattle. If it's not location dependent, I wonder if it's just your perception, or indeed someone is messing with you. Case file number 107, written by O. POTUS. Another sock mystery. Just what's going on with socks? Seriously. This past Christmas, my older sister got me some funny socks that say, "Hide it in my sock." Lost sock randomly appears right when I decided to wash the other sock, since it's been on the floor for a while. It's not my type of humor, but hey, free socks. So after wearing them, I put them in the wash like anyone else. And I know socks have a tendency to go missing to God knows where, so I always try to fold my socks into each other before going into the washer and dryer. All my pairs come out of the washer, still folded into each other. But wait, where the heck is my second sock? I checked the washer, rotated around a couple times to see if it's stuck somewhere inside. I checked the whole laundry load thinking it's in a pant leg or a sweater sleeve. No dice. I checked the washer again, and this time in the rubber seam in between the door and the drum where coins usually build up. Still no second sock. I just blow it off since it's a weird color sock and doesn't really match my wardrobe. After months of having the lonely sock sit on my bed frame just in case the second one pops back up, I decide to add it to my morning laundry load. As I open up my washer, lo and behold, my second "hide it in my sock" is just sitting in the washer drum. I live alone, so I only use the washer and dryer, and I always rotate the drum after every load just to make sure I got everything. How come after months of laundry does my lost sock appear right when I decide to wash the other sock? My mind is blown over a sock. Case notes, file number 107. It's all the timeline builders. They build each minute, second by second, frame by frame. They just forgot your sock all these months, and then you reminded them by putting the other sock back in. No, but really, I have no clue what's happening to these missing items and why they sometimes reappear for us. It's enough to drive us slightly crazy. The universe trying to keep us on our toes, perhaps. Case file number 108, written by Lokendens. A new puppy and a leash defying physics. So this happened about 4 years ago. My family got a new pet dog, Chloe, and she was just a puppy, so it was normal for her to be curious and play around with different things she found. One evening, my family went to the cinema, and I stayed home to work with my computer on a project. I was listening to something on YouTube whilst working, and kept hearing Chloe playing with her leash, as she would usually do. Her bed is about 5 meters in front of my room, about halfway through the corridor. I could hear the jingling of the leash even though the door to my room was closed. I told her to stop a few times, from inside my room, and she did, but in a few minutes it would start again. After a while, it made me lose focus a little. I decided to go and take away the leash and give her a different, more quiet toy. I stood up, still hearing the leash jingling on the floor, opened the door, and saw Chloe laying curled up in her bed like she was trying to sleep. I then looked into the middle of the dark corridor and saw the leash half on the ground and half in the air. From the moment I opened the door, it was already falling to the ground, so when I took my gaze off my dog and was able to focus on the leash, it was already hitting the floor. I panicked a bit, didn't know what I just saw and what to do. I closed the door, barricaded myself inside, moving my wardrobe in front of the door, walked to my computer and watched some things on YouTube to have my mind occupied on something else. When my family came back, they immediately saw that I was very pale. I told them the story, and interestingly, no one even questioned the reality of it. To this day, I have no idea what I saw. Nothing similar has ever happened in our house. Every time I think back to the situation, I get creeped out a lot. Case notes, file number 108. So it certainly could be a ghost. We know they're able to interact with physical matter, at least to some extent. And while ghosts do typically seem to be attached to places or objects, I don't see why that couldn't apply to a loved one too, such as an adopted puppy. Though I do wonder if this puppy had a previous owner. If not, then it's probably not a ghost. Perhaps instead it was some sort of localized time anomaly, such as those that lock people out of phase with reality. A part of the leash might have been caught in this and the other part wasn't. For a brief moment, they would be out of sync, one falling and one already having fallen. Did you notice anything else odd happening in the past 4 years? The author briefly responded to my question, saying, I didn't see anything odd, and our puppy did not have a previous owner. Case file number 109, written by Mafti. Inexplicably, her daughter vanished. Hey, so this just happened, and I've had an eerie and weird feeling that something is not right. First, let me explain the placement of my house. When you come in, there's a little hall, and in front of you, the bathroom. Then you go left, and you have a small kitchen, then a door. Then it's my bedroom, but it's so big I turned it into a living room, and right next to my bedroom is my daughter's bedroom. Everything is an L shape. I, 24 years, live alone with my daughter, 2 years old, and our 2 pet bunnies. So I had lunch with my daughter, and it started getting cold and dark, so we went to my bedroom and closed the door to the kitchen. She always plays in my bedroom and her bedroom that are directly connected. I was reading some Reddit stories whilst listening to her making her usual noises, talking to herself, singing, asking me something, moving toys around, and the basic children noises. Suddenly the house goes completely silent, and after a few seconds I think that maybe she's being mischievous and doing something she isn't supposed to, like all kids do, so I go check on her since I didn't see her from where I was laying. Let me make it clear that there is no way for her to go outside without opening the creaky door to the kitchen that is right in front of me, and she never tried to do so since the lights in the kitchen are off and she's scared of the dark. So I look everywhere in her bedroom and start calling her name. Nothing. Check her closet, nothing. Under the bed, in her little play tent, in her toy chest, under my bed, the sofa, my desk, everywhere. Nothing. She's nowhere to be seen. Let's mention that she's never tried to hide and stuff like that. She comes when she's called, so I started to freak out. I knew I didn't hear her leave my bedroom to the kitchen, but I checked anyways. Nothing. The bathroom, empty. Now I'm starting to panic. I go inside and check everything over, and while I'm in her bedroom, I hear crying from outside and look through my daughter's window to see her outside laying on the ground only wearing a t-shirt. Not the t-shirt she was previously wearing, but one of the t-shirts she does have. I ran outside, almost falling over, but when I opened the door, silence. She wasn't there. There was no crying, just silence again. I go outside and check everything and can't find her or any trace of her being there. Defeated, I go back upstairs ready to call 911 when I go to my bedroom and see her calmly playing with some blocks in her bedroom. She was wearing her clothes as if she never disappeared. The t-shirt I saw her wearing outside was in her wardrobe, neatly folded. I'm still in shock and sitting staring at my daughter, feeling that if I blink, she might disappear again. Case notes, file number 109. I don't personally have kids, so I really can't empathize directly with the panic you must have felt, but I can try to imagine it, and it's not something pleasant. This glitch reminds me of so many others. There was one where his girlfriend vanished from a bathroom he saw her enter, and no windows inside. Then she appeared outside a few minutes later. There are other glitches where everything goes quiet and the world is empty, no people at all. Perhaps this is what happened to you. You temporarily entered into a dead universe or server. It really is wild, and I have no idea what triggers that to happen. At least for you, it didn't last long, if that's indeed what happened. Sometimes it can last for hours. Although given your daughter was there, but wearing something different, perhaps it was just a temporary crossover into a different universe, and not a dead one completely. Case file number 110. Written by Thanos' communist wife. She knew this kid from class. No one remembers from where. I got a new teaching job after being unemployed since last November, as my previous school went out of business. I've only worked at 4 schools in my entire adult life. I walk in on my first day, and I spot a student from the previous school that I already knew. I ran up to her and gave her a big hug. Then another student yells, "Miss Thanos' communist wife!" I yell back, "Oh my god, Bob?" Bob, obviously not his real name. We're all hugging. It's wonderful. A regular Hallmark moment. Fast forward, my boss goes, "You know Bob? How do you know Bob?" I said I taught him at my last school. My boss goes, "Really? Because I told Bob's parents how excited he was to see you, and they said he's never been to that school." So I'm thinking and thinking. I get home and start looking back at school photos. Photos I took on my iPhone. Class photos, and this boy isn't in any of them. I text some former coworkers that I keep in touch with from all the schools. Not only do they not know Bob, they've never had anyone named Bob as a student. It's been a week since that incident, and me and his parents and my boss are still trying to figure this out. His parents even asked him where he knows me from, and he says, "I don't know, I just do." He's 4, so that's an appropriate response. My conspiracy theory is, maybe we met in a past life. Or maybe alternate versions of ourselves have met and it's trickling down into our version. Case notes, file number 110. So yes, a crossover event can produce effects like this. Differences between realities, often very subtle. But the fact that Bob does remember you as well, that points to this not being a crossover. Instead, it's like both of your senses are aligned and attuned to perceive the fact that you know each other but in other universes, without crossing over. Like you said, a sort of trickle-down effect of knowledge, almost a sort of sixth sense. Fascinating. Case file number 111. Written by Jackfruit Rude. At some point in their lengthy timeline together, they diverged. At some point, I separated from the version that my friend and wife are in. Last night, I was over at my friend's house, we'll call her Amber, and we were chatting about family and growing up differently. She mentioned how she'd been cooking for her family since she was 8 years old, and when she was 14, she worked for a catering company and loved it. She said that she thought she was going to go to culinary school. I said, "But you did go to culinary school," and she said she hadn't. But I have several distinct memories of us talking about her going to culinary school. I reminded her of the time my wife and I had dinner at her place. Amber said she would cook and would make a stir-fry. All of this she remembers too. When we got to her place, I was so impressed because she had a kitchen cabinet full of cookware and spices. We were young and no one I knew had a kitchen so well stocked. When I made a comment on it, she said, "Well, yeah, I went to culinary school after all." And we've had multiple conversations like this since. It's one of the first things I knew about her, so we've talked about it throughout our entire 3-year friendship. But when I recounted this story to her last night, she said that the last part wasn't true and that she never went to culinary school. She had never even taken a class or anything. We just stared at each other, shocked and a little speechless. And then I told her we must be from different versions of reality. She said she'd always wanted to go to culinary school, but never did, and I told her that somewhere another Amber that I knew went to culinary school. I think that's pretty poetic and beautiful in a way. When I got home, I asked my wife if she remembers Amber going to culinary school, and she said no right away. I recounted the whole conversation for her, and she still said no. But she and I had had a lot of similar experiences with each other, so I'm not really surprised. I'm going to start writing things down when I learn about a new person so that I can refer back to it. Has anyone else had a similar experience? Case notes, file number 111. This makes me think of the Mandela effect, only applied to a personal memory of a friend's life. There isn't too much that can mess with our brains more than feeling out of sync with reality, at least personally. When we know that X should actually be Y, and in your case that your friend took a life path that she ended up not taking, but you know she did. The most likely cause is a crossover. I think we all know the drill, the feature of the universe that evades the scientific method, because how would you test and observe this? But it is one that I do believe is true, just by all the accounts. So you're probably in a different universe altogether. On a side note, a show I'd recommend that touches on such crossovers is Counterpart, with J.K. Simmons. Excellent acting. I highly recommend it if you're into science fiction and these kind of crossover thought experiments. Case file number 112, written by Rose Ashia. Strange but small anomalies compounding together. Unsettling this is. Hello all. So I, 21 male, recently moved into a new house with my fiance, 25 male, and we've noticed some strange things going on. 1. From our back garden, we have a really lovely view of the city that's even better at night when all the streetlights are on. The view was completely unobstructed, and I would look at it every day as I was sorting out stuff in the garden. Then one day, I was out there doing some little jobs, and noticed that a giant tree/bush was blocking most of the view. I'd been out there the whole day previously, so I know none of the neighbors had it installed or anything. It just appeared out of nowhere. 2. We also have a shopping trolley that we use because a local supermarket is a little walks away, and carrying groceries uphill just isn't for me. It's got 4 double wheels, so 8 wheels in total. We were out shopping last week when my fiance notified me one half of the double back wheel had fallen off, leaving it with just a wheel on the outside rather than its usual one outside, one inside. So naturally I went to look for it in the shop and found nothing. When I got back to my fiance outside, he told me the inside wheel on the back right was also missing now. At first I thought maybe it's always just had 2 outside wheels rather than 4, but the brake for the trolley was in the middle of the 2 wheels on either side, so I know it had 2, but they've just vanished. There doesn't even seem to be anywhere they would stretch if we did have them. 3. This part might not be so relevant, but whenever we're both in the living room, we can hear the distinct sound of someone walking around upstairs and in the kitchen. And every time one of us gets up to check, it stops. Something genuinely weird is happening in our house. Case notes, file number 112. It seems like you might have a mischievous entity on your hands. I see some comments here also suggesting a leprechaun. I have no knowledge of such entities, if those are real or not. This honestly could be as simple as a bored spirit just having a good time driving you folks a bit crazy. Thinking about it myself, if I was trapped as an echo left behind and still sentient, you can be damn sure I'd have some fun. I'd never hurt anyone, but we have to entertain ourselves somehow. Case file number 113, written by Auspicious Arrow, a different sort of story, awaking to a lack of everything. This happened about 2 years ago. My eldest sister was staying with me and sleeping in the room across the hall. The room my sister was staying in wasn't huge by any means. When you walked in, the light switch was by the door and it was about 3 steps to the queen-size bed, which took up most of the room. It was about 4 to 5 feet from the end of the bed to the wall, but there was a vanity and some shelving, so there wasn't a lot of floor space. We go to bed, and my sister looks very disturbed and shaken the next day. She said she woke up in the middle of the night and got up to go to the bathroom. She stood up and reached out for the wall and light switch, but there was nothing there. She kept walking and reaching out, but it was dark and there just was nothing. She found the bed again and walked from the end, but the same thing. She said she had walked 20 or 30 steps in each direction, but here was just nothing. I've slept in that room many times, and there's a window that lets in street light, but there was none of that in her description. She had been in pitch darkness. She sat on the bed for a bit, since it seemed to be the only thing there, freaked out in the dark. And when she tried again, she found the wall and light switch right away. She slept with the light on for the rest of the night. A follow-up post. A few months after posting this, I read a book about fairy folklore from Britain, Scotland, and Ireland, and something interesting caught my eye. There was a story about a man who fell asleep, and when he woke up, the room was exceptionally dark. This was before electricity, so probably not surprising. But when he got off the bed, he couldn't find it anymore, nor could he find the walls. Like another person who commented on the last thread, he finally got out of it by screaming for his family. In another story in the book that was right after this story, in the book it was seen as the same phenomena, being pixie-led. A teenager was walking across a field not far from her house, and it just seemed to go on forever and ever. Even though she had been through the area hundreds of times, it was like it was much bigger than it had ever been. To get out of the situation, a person is supposed to put a piece of clothing on inside out, a lot of times socks, pull their pockets out, or look through their legs to see past the illusion. The girl eventually did one of these things and was freed. Supposedly, this is a sign that one has been pixie-led or glamoured by fairies. Just an interesting alternative theory for a strange situation that many people have experienced. It reminded me a lot of stories I've read on Missing 411 as well. When I read about this, I told my whole family about it and about how to get out of it, just in case one of them ends up in the situation again. Another thing, I was talking to my sister again and she shared a detail I'd forgotten about from the day this happened. When she was wandering around the room for a long time, she eventually ended up touching some kind of fabric that seemed to be hanging. There was one window in the room, but without a curtain, hence the weirdness of not seeing the streetlight through it, and nothing else hanging on the walls that could even remotely be mistaken for fabric. She said it was soft and velvety, and it was all she could feel. Nothing hard behind it, no walls as she followed it. It freaked her out enough that she went back to searching the place. When the space was back to normal, there was nothing like that in the room that she could have mistaken. I often wonder, what would have happened to her if she had tried to go through the fabric? Case Notes, file number 113. It's unique and diverts from what I usually peruse. I'm not sure about fairies exactly, but what's intriguing is reading another comment here saying that in the Philippines, they have similar lore developed, that if you get lost or are trapped in a loop, you need to invert a piece of your clothing to escape. That the same style of lore and myth can develop in isolated regions is incredible. It points to there being some kind of underlying phenomena here that is shared between us all, regardless of location. Case file number 114, written by Dog Lips. A simple notebook vanished, inconceivably returned, changing positions. An important note, I live alone. I was sitting at the kitchen table, writing in a notebook. Finished for the night, I closed the book and put my pencil on top of it. There was nothing else on the table. The next morning, I see the pencil on the table, but the book was gone. I searched everywhere for it. The refrigerator, the piano bench, under the bed, behind the sofa. It was gone. I started writing in a new notebook, figuring I'd stumble across the original one of these days. When I finished, I closed it and left the pencil on top. Again, there was nothing else on the table, just the book and the pencil. For the next week, the pencil and notebook were there exactly as I left them, until the 7th day. I walked into the kitchen, looked at the table, and saw the original notebook underneath the one I'd been using all week, and yes, the pencil was on top. No, I don't have security cameras, but I do leave the security alarm on at night. No, I have no history of sleepwalking, nor does anyone in my biological family. I don't have any pets, as I'm still grieving the loss of my goodest boy. And no, I don't drink or use drugs. I haven't been ill or had any shots lately. Thank you for letting me get this off my chest. Case Notes, file number 114. May your goodest boy rest in peace. As for the anomaly, yeah, disappearing object phenomenon, with an added return order. Almost feels like there must be some entities or server managers playing around with us, making us go crazy. This is the type of stuff I'd do to prank people, if I had the power of invisibility or server mod powers. If we do live in a simulation, of course. They're just small enough mysteries to make you think it doesn't mean much. It must be a coincidence or my faulty memory maybe. But still large enough to create this itch in the back of your mind. A kind of seed of crazy. Case file number 115. Written by Unique Stars. Depression and begging the dead. A dangerous mindset. So this happened back in 2019, around November 2nd, I believe. Not sure if this was just a coincidence or what. So back in 2019, I was pretty much depressed the whole year. Not really suicidal, but let's say I stopped wearing a seatbelt, smoked twice as many cigarettes as I would have normally, and didn't care much about my well-being, for the most part. Due to this depression, and things getting worse mentally, I did a lot of dumb things supernatural-wise. I've always known not to speak to the dead, knowing that when you speak to one spirit, the rest can hear you as well. I've always been extremely superstitious, and believe in the paranormal and supernatural 100%. Anyways, I live next to a huge cemetery and drive by it every day since it's right across from my neighborhood. Due to my superstitions and believing that the dead can do things us humans aren't capable of, each day I would scream out of the window when passing the cemetery, begging for one of the spirits to get me in a car accident. So I did that each day while driving past the cemetery. Lo and behold, November 6th, I was driving to work at about 4:30 a.m. I go the same way every day and was coming up to a red light. Out of nowhere, and I kid you not, this was literally out of freaking nowhere, I heard a loud honk from behind me and I was rear-ended by one of those big white RG&E trucks that fix telephone poles and stuff. Since I was at the red light, it basically pushed my car forward into the middle of the intersection. And once again, out of nowhere, I was T-boned by some random-ass old man in a van with his wife. I was driving an 05 Nissan Sentra at the time, and it was completely wrecked, literally demolished, and I had not one scratch on me at all. My knees were extremely bruised. I have no idea how that happened, but that was pretty much it. This also happened literally on the main road coming out of my neighborhood about a mile down from the cemetery. There are never any cars this early in the morning, maybe one, but even that's rare for the most part. Also, while I was talking to the old man, they live in a town literally 40 freaking minutes away and were driving to the park. The whole story is so weird, and honestly, it kind of creeps me out. But yeah, I was in an extremely bad financial situation also, and was stuck without a car for quite a bit. When I was driving by the cemetery, begging to be in an accident, I meant that I wanted it to be fatal, so I think whichever spirit heard me or whatever wanted to mess with me or something. I don't know, take it as you will. Maybe this is an extremely weird coincidence, but if not, always remember to be careful what you wish for when speaking to the dead. Case Notes, file number 115. This is interesting to me mainly because of how our will can affect our own actions and perception of the world. The question is, did a malevolent spirit inject themselves into the old man driving this large service truck, causing him to rear-end you? Or was this part coincidence? Accidents of course do happen frequently enough. Actually, what surprises me most is the fact that you were completely uninjured, besides some bruising. I've personally been in a very light car crash before, very low speed, also rear-ended. My neck took months to recover just from that. So in your case, yeah, it could have been fatal. Maybe it should have been. My instinct is actually the reverse of yours. Maybe the spirits in your area offered you protection from the accident that was indeed just an accident. Or maybe I'm just the eternal optimist, huh? Either way, glad you are okay, and I hope you feel better now. Case file number 116, written by Rebecca Lynn. On a sunny day, a shock of darkness engulfs her. Okay, so I've never posted on Reddit and made this account strictly to post this because I'm at a loss and confused and have no idea what the hell I experienced yesterday. My husband, 2 kids, and I went to O'Reilly's to get some car parts yesterday. My husband ran in while the kids and I stayed in the car. It was a perfect day, sunny, 73, not one single cloud in the sky, and it was about 1:45 in the afternoon. We had been sitting in the car for a couple of minutes when all of a sudden everything, and I mean everything, went pitch black for a second, and I had no sense of sound. It was gone as fast as it came and I thought I had blacked out. Before I could say anything, my 7-year-old son said, "Mom, what just happened?" My heart instantly dropped because there's no freaking way he just experienced the exact same thing at the exact same time, right? Just to make sure I didn't put anything into his head, I asked what he was talking about. He said word for word, "It was totally dark for a minute and I couldn't hear anything." I was absolutely dumbfounded and had no idea how to respond to him considering I was having an internal panic attack, trying to stay calm so I wouldn't scare him. I immediately rolled down my window and looked everywhere for some kind of explanation. A blimp, a plane, maybe a cloud, even a bird, though I knew none of that could explain what we experienced. But there was nothing, not a single thing in the perfectly blue sky. There was a man fixing his car right next to us, and he was completely unfazed, so I don't believe he experienced it. My husband returned to the car and I told him everything. He of course thought we were pranking him, but quickly came to believe us after I started crying because I was terrified. I've never been a religious person, and I've never really looked into or believed any theories like the simulation, but boy, let me tell you after yesterday, I'm not sure I can believe anything but the simulation theory. I stumbled upon this thread as soon as I started reading on Google, trying to find answers, and I have found so many accounts of people experiencing the exact same thing. To make it even weirder, I noticed that in a lot of people's experiences, it's happened on a cloudless sunny day and several were parents with their children. I'm not sure what the point of me posting this is, but I felt like this was the only place I would be able to tell my story without people saying I'm crazy. Case Notes, file number 116. You're right, a lot of people seem to be experiencing this phenomena. It clearly isn't caused by a plane or anything in the sky. Even with the moon in perfect alignment to create an eclipse, day turns into dusk, not 100% pitch blackness. He also mentioned the lack of sound. That's a new detail that I haven't heard from other sun glitch stories. I wonder if your son also experienced this lack of noise. He mentioned it went black for a minute. Was that just a figure of speech, or did his perception of this event endure longer than yours did? Then there's also the man working on his car who appeared to not have experienced anything, although maybe he was just pretending not to, so he didn't appear crazy. If he wasn't pretending, then it does lean towards a non-geographical glitch, something about you and your son caused it, or interacted with the area in your immediate vicinity inside the car. How peculiar. Case file number 117, written by Why Am I So Freaking Good? Even after passing away, his cousin's grudge remained. I haven't shared this with anyone until now. My experience was terrifying. Here it is. My cousin Jack died last month. I didn't care though. In fact, me and my other cousins were happy that he died. He is utter trash. When we were teenagers, he tried to kill me because I told my mom, who in turn informed his mother that he's doing drugs. So later, he convinced my other cousin to move in with him after she was kicked out of her house. Then for the first whole week, he pimped her out for buying drugs and also took turns in abusing her. She was horrified by what was happening around her, and there's no way she could have contacted us as he took her mobile and Mac away from her. She did escape, but trauma stayed with her and later she committed suicide. Everyone in the family came to know about the suicide, but nobody pressed charges because his parents begged us not to. His mom had a terminal illness and she begged us all not to take away her son. Last month, he OD'd and died. I didn't even attend his funeral. So coming to last week, I had a weird dream where he appeared and threatened to kill me. He said he came to kill me. I was scared to death. In my dream, I went back into my home and took my dad's revolver, and when he was banging on my door, I shot a few rounds at the door, and after some silence, I was relieved. But again, there was a heavy bang at my door, and it got broken, and I don't remember how, but I tricked him from room to room and ran outside with my gun. After he came to know that I was outside, he came straight to me, and I shot a few rounds at him. It didn't hurt, I guess, but he was kinda trying to avoid getting shot, and in a whole fiasco, he escaped to my neighbor's home while I was shooting continuously. I have no idea how the revolver kept on continuously with bullets, more than 30 or 40 shots, but then again it was a dream. Then I heard he was throwing tantrums loudly, and he was throwing things in their house, and then I heard a big scream, still in the dream, from my neighbor's home, and with that sudden shock combined with heavy sweating, I was awake. I couldn't sleep at all. Everything felt so real in a dream. I thought it was just a nightmare, but next morning, I came to know that my neighbor's wife was dead. I couldn't brush it off as coincidence because she was in her early 30s, perfectly fine, no complications. She was a health-conscious person and tomboy type, and even the coroner couldn't find the cause of death. Edit 1. I confirmed if anything else happened with my other cousins. They said nothing weird happened, but they believed in my experience and told me that they knew that Jack always hated me for ratting him out. When he was alive, he occasionally told them that if it ever came to an end, the last thing that would make him happy is killing me. Edit 2. After reading a few comments, I would not push my end of the picture that I'm believing or bringing, but I felt obligated to correct and confirm a few things. 1. The scream from my neighbor's wife was in the dream, not in real life. 2. I woke up being all sweaty at around 3:20. I checked the clock, and the estimated time of my neighbor's death is between 3 to 5 a.m. Case notes, file number 117. Damn, this is an emotionally charged story, seriously. I'm just glad you're okay. It's actually somewhat straightforward in my mind though. When we pass, we leave an echo behind, an imprint of sorts. A kind of manifestation of who we are in energy. In this case, Jack was a total jerk, and in that imprint left behind, filled to the brim with potent hatred, he tried to kill you. However it happened, you were able to resist this in your dream, and he switched targets as a result. I guess that kind of hatred boils over, and the target doesn't even really matter. Really sad about your neighbor though. Damn. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like. And feel free to watch more on my channel, I have a lot more content.